welcome to the Make It Work podcast. I'm your host, Cluanny Saunders. In this podcast, we are talking to practitioners who are making their own work in the UK right now. So join us, learn with us, and let's make it work.
I watched Chicago at a very impressionable age and thought it was the best thing in the world. Actually performing in something like that isn't the most creative experience. Since the pandemic, anything kind of original has just had a lot of kickback. Yeah, I was going to turn into a massive attention seeker at some point, and now I can do it for my job, so.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to work for other companies, see how they do it, and then I'm going to start making my own work. Programmers have such little time to skim read one of those emails that if you can put in, you know, I was in this show, or I know this person, or whatever, just something to like hook them. And it is so hard, and there are so many gatekeepers that the little guys, we just have to be fighting for each other.
My guest today is Tessa Bide. Tessa is an award-winning theater maker, performer, and producer. She's artistic director of Tiny and Tall Productions, which she began as Tessa Bide Productions in 2013 and now runs with Alice Massey. As well as working as a performer and director for other companies, Tessa has made multiple Arts Council England-funded family theatre productions with her own company, including the Tap Dancing Mermaid, The Selfish Giant, A Strange New Space, the Anarchist's Mobile Library, and Bob. Her work tours nationally and internationally. She uses puppetry, physical theatre, and music to tell these stories in a dynamic and unforgettable way. Welcome, Tessa. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
I got to catch your beautiful show today at the Greenwich Theatre, The Selfish Giant. It was a really lovely show, and the entire crowd of children were enthralled.
Thank you. Yeah, we had two really nice shows today.
Yeah. How are you finding, it's a revisiting of that show, isn't it?
Yeah, we've actually been, that show we made in 2018, so yeah, it's been coming out for odd occasions here and there over the years. We had a really nice residency in Bristol over Christmas at the Tobacco Factory for a month, and then yeah, this is a little, I think, I don't know how many dates we've had this spring, maybe like 12 dates, a little mini tour this spring. So yeah, it's really nice to get it out again, because it's a really, it's a real fond favourite of ours and families as well. So yeah, it's been really nice.
So where is the story of The Selfish Giant from?
It's a classic Oscar Wilde tale. And yeah, we were kind of drawn to it because it's got this like really beautiful, enchanting winteriness around it. At one point in the original story, the giant builds this huge wall, and then in the garden it's perpetual winter. So and all the elements are kind of personified. So you have like wind and sleet and snow. They're all kind of characters who come out. So yeah, that's what drew us to it. And then the original story goes a little bit religious.
Okay.
We've adapted that and changed that. And we've made the giant female, the child female. So yeah, we've had a play with it and made it more about the kind of cyclical nature of nature, and the seasons, and kind of caring for the environment rather than, you know, so much of a religious
Yeah, I didn't get a religious
slant.
message from it today.
No.
Okay, so you and your theatre company, now called Tiny and Tall,
Yeah.
started out as Tessa Bide Productions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just me at the beginning.
Yeah. And what first inspired you to start making your own shows?
When I was a teenager, I was really into dance, musical theatre, that kind of thing. But also, I really enjoyed writing and devising, creating kind of new stuff. And there was a theatre company who made devised theatre for family audiences in my little town in Dorset, which was quite random because there wasn't much going on down there. And I kind of worked for them doing odd bits and bobs, going on tour, making tea, processing their receipts, really glamorous stuff for minimum wage. And I started to really enjoy that insight of, devised work. And in the contemporary dance stuff that I was doing, there was a choreographer who came in who was more physical theatre than straight kind of contemporary dance. And we kind of devised / choreographed a piece together, and it really kind of got me inside. And I found it really satisfying kind of making something from scratch, and seeing people's reaction to that. So yeah, that's where that journey started, I think, from kind of teen years, and realizing that although I watched Chicago at a very impressionable age and thought it was the best thing in the world, actually performing in something like that isn't the most creative experience, because, if you're doing it really well, you should do it exactly how the person before you did it, more or less. And then the person after you will do it very similar to that. And it became, quite clear that wasn't necessarily the route that I was going to find so satisfying, I guess.
And so you made your first show at the age of, am I 22?
Yeah, 22, 23.
Yeah. And it was the Tap Dancing Mermaid.
Yeah. It's a political thriller. No, it's not. I worked for that theatre company for a few years, and then, and it was great. It was a good on-the-job training. I was their assistant producer, and they also bought a theatre that they were going to use to rehearse in, but I kind of headed up running it as a venue, so I had a bit of experience from like a venue perspective, running a theatre company perspective, and then they put me into some shows, first as like maternity cover understudy, and then I did a solo show in 2012, and then I kind of thought, perfect, I know how this works now. There were a few things in that company that didn't work so well, mainly like running it with your partner whilst going through some troubles. So I've said that that's probably not what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So learnt loads of lessons, moved to Bristol, and thought, okay, great, I'm going to work for other companies, see how they do it, and then I'm going to start making my own work. So I auditioned for loads of jobs, started teaching and waitressing, didn't get any of the jobs, and was just like, I could just slip into teaching and waitressing forever now, unless I make a show, unless I do it myself. So yeah, people over the years have kind of said, oh, how brave to make a thing when you're so young and to make your own work. It really didn't feel like that. It just felt like no one else is going to give me a job. I had this idea for this story that I had kind of half written, a kind of seasidey tale narrated by the moon. And it just felt like, well, if no one else is going to give me a job, I'll do it myself. And yeah, within that, it was, I guess, quite a big leap. But when you're that age and you haven't done a whole lot, people's expectations, they're not kind of going, ooh, she's been in the biz for 20 years. I wonder what her own work is going to be like. Actually, no one knew me from Adam, really. So it felt really exciting.
I think that's a great perspective to have, because I think so many people, including myself, sometimes feel so like overwhelmed by what they don't know. And in fact, you're saying that could be quite freeing. Yeah,
I think, it was a big bonus kind of starting that young, because I had that kind of naive bravery and ballsiness that allowed me to do it. And I think the more you overthink something like that, making your own work, and perhaps a specific idea, the more you could be prone to, overthinking it, making it into such a big deal that you put so much pressure on yourself. So actually, I've been mentoring some people over the years who have had DYCPs, Developing Your Creative Practice grant from the Arts Council, and, people spending a year or two researching how to make your own work. And, you know, most of the time I end up saying, you will not learn these lessons until you do it. You know, you just, it can be a painful and quite slow way to learn these lessons, the kind of trial and error of making work. But with every show I've made, I've learned loads of lessons, and I've kind of pushed myself to do things in a different way. Every show I've kind of gone, okay, what about if I have a cast of 4 and no recorded music? What if I make a show without words? What if I make a show in a tent? What if I make a show? So every show I've kind of taxed myself to go out of my comfort zone, learn new things, and actually I think that's been a brilliant way of learning for me.
Yeah. And you put a little breakdown. I think during lockdown you did like a little talk on your YouTube channel about how you go through your shows. How you so you said having an idea, then telling people about it, getting them on board.
Yeah.
Applying for funding for an R&D. But before that, you have to book a tour. And I just really enjoyed the way you said this, because it's not something we've really talked about on the show, but it's a really enjoyable thing to hear you say was, you don't actually have a show, but you're persuading programmers that you will have this great show. So you're selling a thing that doesn't exist, and then you get funding to develop and tour it. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that is the case, but I haven't actually talked to anyone about it specifically on the podcast.
Great homework, Chloe. I'm like going back in my memory 4 years into that. But yeah, we did a really nice series of like Meet the Maker.
Yeah.
Similar to this, I guess, with people from all different, all different job roles in the theatre industry, of how they got into it and what their job looks like.
And really interesting, actually. People should go check it out. It's still up on YouTube.
Yeah.
I was sitting there going, let's take my
there's
little
like
notes.
a fight director, like intimacy director. There's projection designers, writers. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me of that. I don't know. I found this. I have found a little bit of a structure or a formula, I guess, of how to make a show, and you're right, the weirdest step is selling a thing that you don't have yet, and we tend to do most of the tour booking between like after the R&D. So after the R&D, you've played with some ideas. You might have like half or a third of the amount of material that the full show will be. You might have some set pieces made of cardboard instead of whatever they'll be made of. And then convincing people that it's going to be the best thing ever, even though you've only got that much of it. The very first step of trying to get people on board for the R&D, when you might really only have the vaguest idea, that can be tricky, especially when you're first starting out and nobody knows who you are. I really remember batting off, dozens and dozens and dozens of emails saying, I'm making this show, and you don't know who I am or anything about it, but please can you give it some support? And I think it's a bit of a volume game, getting it out there, and also whatever kind of contacts you might have. So because I had worked for that other company and I had toured with a solo show for them, I then kind of contacted all of the venues that I had just gone to in that show and said, hey, that was really popular. Like, I'm back with this new show that I've written. And I made it clear that, I was just in that show and this was my work. But programmers, I've seen it from being on the venue side of running a venue, and programmers have such little time to skim read one of those emails that if you can put in, I was in this show, or I know this person, or whatever, just something to like hook them, that can really pay dividends. Yeah.
Well, pre-existing relationships are always going to help, aren't they? I mean, I've also found with doing this podcast, if I know someone who I'm much more likely to get some form of response from people. I think it's the same in all forms of business as well. Yeah.
I just wasn't going to get anything of that from like family connections. My dad is a tax man and my mum was a primary school teacher. So it's like no juicy connections there. That's not going to help me out.
That's interesting. So where do you think you got that sort of, I want to be a performer bent?
My eldest sister, I've got two sisters. My eldest sister is a brilliant actor. And you always look up to your siblings and kind of watch them and go, okay, yeah, I'm gonna mirror that and aim to be that. And I really loved watching her. I still love watching her. And so I think a bit of that, but then I'm the third child, desperate for attention. It was kind of always going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Apparently, first year of my life, I just lived in a car seat because I was just being dragged around from here to there. And yeah, I was going to turn into a massive attention seeker at some point. And now I can do it for my job.
So you've done 10 shows and they're all different. As you say, you sort of set yourself a challenge for each show.
Yeah.
So what really draws you to something, or what sparks that first idea for you?
I think when I'm making an original story, so I do a combination of original stories and adaptations, and I think I always get more excited for the original stories because they're from my brain, and it can be really random, the solo show that I'm remounting this year that I was the last trip I went to Edinburgh with. It was it's called A Strange New Space. It's a non-verbal physical theatre kind of story of a child refugee finding a safe space to live, told through the metaphor of like a space journey. And I literally kind of, I think I woke up and thought of a mother telling her child, we need to find a safe space to live. And the child kind of going, safe space, cool. And going off into an imaginary world to try and process some of what was going on in the real life. So that, normally I get the first inkling of an idea like that, but because it might not be my lived experience, or because I might want or need other brilliant brains to come in on it, then I'll go through a kind of fairly hefty research process to then flesh it out into a full story. With other shows like the Tap Dancing Mermaid or Arnold's Big Adventure or the Melody Makers, I've kind of half written a story and then gone, cool, that's good enough. That's as much as I need to sell it to various people to get funding, and we can figure out the nitty gritty in the room when I've got lots of brilliant people there with me.
Do you think that process of selling those ideas has gotten easier now that you do have a body of work behind you and people know you? Those relationships have grown within the theatre community and wider.
I would say if the pandemic hadn't happened, then yes, it would be a piece of peace right now. It was definitely getting to the point where, and it still is, that we've got maybe, I don't know, between 10 and 20 venues who we can just say, I've got an idea for a thing, and they'll say, yes, please. And I won't even have to say what the thing is. And actually, this mini tour of The Selfish Giant was actually supposed to be a much larger tour of The Detective Dog, which is our next show, which sadly we didn't get funding for just before Christmas. So we kind of flipped it and said, look, we've got Selfish Giant rehearsed. Do you want that one? And because a lot of venues trust us and, we've been there several times, they were like, okay, even if they've had it before. So yeah, there's definitely like a privilege and a kind of ease that comes with having been around the block, made lots of different things, toured a lot. But I would say, especially with original titles, like I've written a kind of Christmassy show called The Magic Snow Globe, which we've been trying to kind of get off the ground for a few years. And since the pandemic, anything kind of original has just had a lot of kickback. So that's why we kind of pivoted and went, okay, we'll play your game. We'll make a Julia Donaldson book into a show with the detective dog. But again, following my kind of ethos of like, I want to learn and push myself and push the theatre for young audiences industry with every show. How can I make this different to what's out there and what I've done before? And over the last few years, we've been working with deaf creatives and making shows with and for deaf audiences, and so that's the challenge that we're bringing to Detective Dog, to make it for deaf and hearing audiences. So yeah, it's been there's definitely some privileges that come from being around for over a decade, but I'd say the state that the industry is in at the moment, like it's really no kind of easy playing field out there.
Yeah. You mentioned just briefly there sort of accessibility for your work with the deaf community, but you're also interested in that in other facets of your work in creating accessible work. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think making intergenerational shows, you know, you've got, even before I kind of learned more about accessibility from, you know, various kind of access needs and disabilities, I was already catering for such a wide range of audiences, you know, and what I've always tried to do with my work is make it just as enjoyable for the 30-year-old, the 70-year-old and the 5-year-old all in one go, instead of kind of, you know, one of those kids shows where the kids are going mental, but the adults are like, get me out of here. Or vice versa, you know, the adults are all laughing at some innuendo, or the kids are like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
So yeah, trying to get everyone to connect with the same thing at the same time, I think, you know, gave me a good kind of starting platform for thinking about how different people access a story. And with A Strange New Space, I went over to Greece and kind of researched it in kind of refugee camps in Athens. And after that, we worked with a primary school with groups of children, autistic children, who helped us make the show and make the supporting resources around the show. And you're never gonna, what I've learned over the years is you're never gonna make a show that's accessible for everyone. So what we've tried to do is with certain shows, really hone in on an audience group's experience and how to best serve them. So for Detective Dog, you know, with the deaf community, right from the get-go of kind of having that idea, it was, okay, we need to get kind of accessibility consultants on board, deaf consultants on board, because if you try and tack anything like that on, you know, when you've made a show and gone, oh, actually, we should have probably, let's make it accessible for this audience, you're like 2 years too late. And so, yeah, it's been a real journey. In 2020, we made a digital version of our show, The Anarchist mobile library, which was like a kind of choose your own adventure story about changing endings. So we wanted to kind of empower young people to be little activists, I guess, and change the endings that they see in the world. And we made a digital version when lockdown happened, kind of audio adventure. And then we got some funding to make it in Welsh, so we did a Welsh language version, which was fun. And then we made a BSL version and a British Sign Language version. And again, that was the first time that I had worked on, with any deaf performers or deaf creatives, and it was just so inspiring, and I absolutely loved it. And yeah, it's kind of inspired me to learn. I'm on my level 2 BSL now. Yay.
Oh, wow.
But it's a big old journey. I feel like we're just getting our head around making work in a really satisfying and encouraging way with deaf creatives, and then the next show will have its next lessons and its its challenges. So I'm not going to say we make all of our shows accessible for everyone, but especially in the last kind of 6 years or so, it's been a journey that I'm learning on.
We had an interview with a company called Flawboard, who are disability led. I don't know if you've seen their latest work, but their whole piece is basically about that whole idea of accessible. How can you make a piece accessible to every single person? And the fact that is impossible. It's an interesting topic, and it's certainly one that I've had discussions with multiple practitioners on. So I think it's very top of mind, which is good.
And also what we've been learning over the years is you can't suddenly say, oh, we're accessible and this one show is for deaf audiences, because they'll say, who the hell are you?
Yeah.
Where have you been?
Yeah.
So over since the BSL version of the Anarchist mobile library and doing interpreted shows, so just our older shows but with interpreters, like slowly chipping away and going, we are here also for you. It's just a journey, but you have to earn people's trust, and they're not going to trust you straight away. So it's not going to be a kind of flash in the pan thing. It's a journey that we're really passionate about, and again has just taught us how much we don't know. So I think that's quite healthy.
Yeah. And so you said we there. You work with a number of collaborators that you have used over multiple shows, but you also do expand to a wider team. How do you choose people to work with, or how do you find people that fit in with your ethos?
I think so. At the core, I now have a kind of partner in crime, Alice Massey, who started working for me 6 years ago as kind of assistant producer, and then it was co-producer, and now we're like, who are we kidding? You're the producer. So yeah, we've reached, it was a relationship that I always wanted. It was always so many decisions for one person, when I was running it by myself. So, and now neither of us would make any decisions without the other one say so. I went away for a month last year to get married and honeymoon and all that, and there was like a problem that went on with one tour, and Alice apparently she was like, I was pacing around my flat just going, what would Tessa do? What would Tessa do? Because she didn't want to text me because I was in like Japan somewhere. So yeah, we're the very close we, I guess. And then choosing people for different projects. I mean, I think it's really important to hold open auditions. I think having being a performer, and especially when I was starting out and just trying to get something from auditions, it can be really frustrating when you're just seeing these roles filled and you had no idea about them and you couldn't put yourself out there. So we hold auditions for performers, and sometimes it will be that. I remember we auditioned a performer called Jess Clough McRae for Perfect, a show called Perfect that I made in 2018. And she was very close to being perfect for that role, but didn't get it. And then a year or two later, we made the Anarchist mobile library, and I was like, that woman is going to be great. So she came in for that one. So I tried to remember people from, past auditions as well. We made a kind of library version of the Detective Dog last year that could just pop up very small scale for people for free, a totally subsidized tour. And we found our brilliant performer, Mary Johnson, through auditioning. And then when it comes to, with the other members of the team, sound designers, lighting designers, movement directors, all that kind of stuff, sometimes we'll do some spy work. Sometimes we'll watch something and go, wow, the music on that was amazing, or the lighting on that was amazing. Who did they have? And sometimes it will be asking around.
Yeah.
Good old fashioned asking around.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So you talked about watching other theatre just then.
Mm-hmm.
When you're watching other theatre, are you inspired? Are there things that you've seen recently that you might say, this is amazing and this is the kind of work I'd love to make or I make?
It's always tricky, isn't it, watching theatre when you make theatre?
Yeah.
Because I always say if you watch something that's similar to what you make, I always say it's like a lose-lose scenario. You either don't enjoy it and you're like, why the hell is that so popular? I could do something better.
Yeah.
Or it's absolutely great and you're really jealous and you're like, damn it, I wish I had made that thing.
It's so true.
And sometimes it's a combination of the two.
Exactly.
Sometimes you can literally sit there and be like, I'm annoyed. Oh, I'm really inspired and I'm annoyed because of that. So when I watch things very similar to what I make, that's the journey that I go on. And I've recently had both experiences. There's a company in Bristol called Flibbity Gibbet.
Great name.
And they made a show called The Farmer and the Clown, which is an adaptation of a picture book with no words. And it's the best thing I've seen in a really long time. It's just stunning. Like, absolutely gorgeous. The whole thing looks like a painting, like a Wes Anderson movie the whole way through. And it got all of the audience at the same time with the same content. So that's what I think, that's when I think performance for young audiences is doing things really well, when you've got everyone feeling those feelings. And it might be that, the audience of different ages are reading more into it. There might be a sad scene and a child is reading it on a very basic level. This person is sad. And the adult might be going, oh, that reminds me of this time in my life. And actually, I know that she's sad because of this, this, and this. So, yeah, I just absolutely adored it. And then, saw something again that I was not inspired by and went, this is really annoying. The best case scenario is watching something that's quite different to what I make and it being excellent and going, great, I just really enjoyed that. I wouldn't have done that because it's not what I do. So I'm inspired, but I'm not jealous.
And was there an example of that recently?
I'm a real fan of Ad Infinitum's work. And it is so far from, what I make, but it is, it's just spellbinding. Spellbinding.
Why do you make children's theatre, if that's not too bold a question? Why do you want to make theatre for families and young people?
I think the challenge, I mean, it started out that I wasn't going to just make that kind of work. And my original kind of branding was very like neutral, because I didn't know where I was going to go with it. And the fact that I called it Tessa Bide Productions, it was just, this is coming from me. But then all the stories that I was kind of writing and popped into my head were all suitable for, you know, intergenerational family audiences. So I just thought, okay, well, another one has popped into my head. Let's go with that. Oh, another one has popped into my head. Let's go with that. And actually, the further I've gone down that route, the more satisfying I find the challenge of trying to get multi-generational audiences enjoying it at the same time. I think, I mean, I've worked on shows, you know, for adult audiences, for older audiences, and I really enjoy it. Really love it, and it's great to have a freelance hat so I can scratch those itches if and when they come up. But yeah, there is something about the joy of seeing a family kind of all coming out at the same time, having enjoyed something all at the same time. And also quite a few of my shows have had like a theme or a topic that might be a bit tricky to talk about sometimes. So yeah, A Strange New Space was about kind of displacement and refugee crisis and migration. Perfect was about having a disabled sibling. Bob was about death and grief. Anarchist Mobile Library about activism, standing up for what you believe in. So these topics that a family might be kind of going, oh, how do we talk about this? I would really love to be able to talk about it. And, you know, sadly, A Strange New Space is relevant all over again this year with so much displacement, so much war going on, that I find it quite an amazing thing to be able to provide an entertaining, like fun, memorable trip to the theatre that can also serve as like, hey, that can be how we talk about that tricky thing. So it's not been with every single one of our shows. Sometimes I just have a wonderful story that feels magical and brilliant to tell, but I do find that really satisfying, kind of having a story with a deeper meaning that can be the catalyst for great conversation between generations.
And you also work in other people's shows, you know, as you mentioned a little bit there. Now, for me as a theater maker, one of the toughest things is, how do you split your time between all the things that you do? Obviously, you know, you're a performer, but you're also a creator, but you're also a producer, but you're also... So any tips for me and all those listening?
I'd say the times it's worked most successfully is when I might end up having a really excellent role, not given to me, but, you know, I've auditioned for it and they've selected me, and I'm able to then rehearse a different actor into my show that I was going to do. So, like, that's a lovely problem to have. Like, oh, I was going to be in my own show. Oh, now this other company have asked me to be in their show. And so what I aim to do is to be in the initial tour of one of my shows, and then to recast it and send it out. So that's been quite a successful model for me. It keeps getting my work out, and sometimes as a company, we can earn like a sustaining kind of wage off the gigs. Sometimes not. Sometimes you have to have Arts Council funding to subsidise the tour. But yeah, casting other people into my work so then I can be freed up to do other things. That's been the model, really. It's certainly been harder since the pandemic to for me as a performer to get work with other companies. But as that's been quieter, my kind of directing, outside eye puppetry direction work has become busier. So, which I also really love. And it means that I can be at home whilst doing it, which is really great. So, yeah, it's always a juggle. It's like a crazy juggle. And I get it wrong, of course. But I would say that's something to consider. If you do have that clash, if you see the dream job come up, but you know that your show is supposed to be doing 4 dates or something really annoyingly small, consider recasting and putting somebody else in it. Sometimes the tour or whatever will pay for itself and pay for the rehearsals. Sometimes not. Sometimes you might have to take the hit and just go, well, I'm going to have 3 months work in somebody else's show, so that will make up for it,
Yeah. And so in terms of your performing side, would you say that the work that you're making has changed how you're viewed in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to come calling because there's a new BBC period drama and they need Tessa Bide to be in it. I 100% will be thought of and perhaps typecast for family theatre. And it's something that, I've kind of looked into how to be able to diversify myself as a performer, and the name change of the company is part of that. So distancing myself from it and saying, this is Tiny and Tall, I am Tessa Bide, we are two separate things, may help that. But also, I don't think it's the end of the world. It's work that I love and it's work that I'm good at and that I am very experienced in. So, long term, I might want to try new things, and that's kind of where that name change, part of the inspiration behind that name change has come from. But generally, if someone goes, ooh, we need a really great performer for this family theatre work, or deviser or puppetry director or whatever, outside eye director, and they think of me, I'm not going to complain.
No, it's great. So many different sort of avenues you can go down with your work. It's amazing. And the puppetry in the piece I saw today was so outstanding. It was really engaging, and the little puppets brought us into this world of where there were giants and then there were children. Mm-hmm. So when did you start working with puppets? I think it was as early as the Tap Dancing Mermaid.
Yeah, it was a bit before that. It was working for the company down in Dorset. They use puppets in their shows, and I think coming from a dance background, I think dancers, physical theatre performers can quite often pick up puppetry quite naturally because you've got that basis in weight, movement, impetus, all that kind of stuff. So I took to it very quickly and easily, and it's a tool I haven't used in every show of mine. Sometimes I'd say the only typecasting thing I get frustrated by is when people say that we're just a puppet theatre company or just use puppetry, which is excellent if that's what you do. And I love puppetry work and I love puppet theatre companies, but we are a broader, I I don't know, maybe 30% of the show you saw today was puppetry and the rest wasn't. So it's anyway, that's a side note.
I think a just before anything always sounds reductive, doesn't it?
Exactly. But I just love puppetry to be this tool, as a storytelling tool. When you look in your toolkit and kind of go, okay, we need to span time here. We need to change scale and show, physical, geographical scale. We need to, in A Strange New Space, there's a scene at the beginning where we learn the girl's kind of journey for her when her home is destroyed and she loses her mum, and that is through a puppet to make it slightly easier to digest, to remove a kind of layer of emotion, I guess, because they're very simple puppets without faces or anything. They're like dolls, basically. And then at the end of the show, she makes a friend for her doll out of like a bottle and a bowl, and this puppet becomes this like kind of alien friend. So yeah, when you're in a solo show, you need more characters. You know, there's so many scenarios when puppetry is just so excellent, and there is something kind of timeless, ageless around it that a puppet really beautifully puppeteered can just hook in people from 3 to 103.
So you actually do guide people through Arts Council funding and starting their own companies, things like that, early career artists. What's one thing you tell them that maybe you weren't told or wish you were told?
Oh man, there's so many.
I'm sure there are.
There are so many. And when I tell people these nuggets, I'm like, it took me 5 years to learn this. No, to be honest, like I was writing my bio for our new Tiny and Tour website the other day, and I said in it, the performing arts industry, the theatre industry is so hard sometimes, most times, that really we just, as much open communication that can happen as possible is what we stand for, what I stand for. The reason I got my first funding bid, age 22, whatever it was because someone showed me their successful application. It's that pizza or that pie analogy, isn't it? Like, just, I've already got my funding. It's not going to hurt me. No one's going to take my funding away if I show you my funding application. And it is so hard, and there are so many gatekeepers that the little guys, we just have to be fighting for each other, and going, there's so much secrecy around fees, around pay, around, the deals that we get with theatres. And the more we and the whole industry have been opening up these conversations and just going, I've just been offered this. I don't know how I'm supposed to take a show on that. Oh, well, they actually offered me £500 more. That's interesting. They said they never did. It's just, it's putting a tiny bit more power into the artist's kind of pocket, because sometimes it can feel incredibly powerless when you're at the whim or the kind of decision of gatekeepers, of funders, of programmers. So yeah, it's work that I really, really enjoy, consulting and mentoring. There's so many things, but like on the Arts Council front, the Arts Council make you jump through some hoops, and sometimes they can feel arbitrary, but sometimes, damn it, they know what they're doing, and there's been projects that I've kind of thought, I don't need any participation with this. I just need these people in a room and we're going to make a great thing. And, you know, this is kind of in the past, a while ago before I learnt about this. And people, you know, I kind of learned pretty quickly that actually you're way more likely to get the funding if you have outreach, if you have participation, if you partner with a school or a charity or, you know, an organisation and do, you know, workshops around it. And it always makes the piece better. It always does. And sometimes when I'm consulting someone or advising someone and I say, "Ooh, you know, it sounds like a great idea, but you aren't really reaching out to anyone to work with, you're not doing any workshops, you know, is that something that you could maybe bring into it?" Sometimes people are very reticent to, but if they do it and then they get the funding, the feedback I always get is, "I'm so glad I did that work." So sometimes the Arts Council can feel like ticking boxes that just don't feel relevant. But sometimes with that stuff, they really know what they're doing, and it does make the work better.
Oh, that's great advice. We've not heard that one before. That's great.
Good.
So where can we see, sadly we're running out of time, but where can we see your current work, The Selfish Giant?
The Selfish Giant is doing a few more tour dates before I get too pregnant, because I am 5 months pregnant. So the Selfish Giant is going to Sale near Manchester. It's going to Blackwood Miners in Wales. It's going to Didcot, Oxford. I think those are our last dates. It's ending in the beginning of June.
Okay.
And then we have a strange new space doing 2 weeks of schools touring around Suffolk through the Theatre Royal, Bury St Edmunds Theatre Royal. Haha, there we are. Yeah, it's doing a couple of weeks of school touring and then some southwest dates, Bristol for May half term, at the Wardrobe Theatre, the Pound Arts, the Front Room and Western Supermare. So it's doing a little southwest tour and yeah, hopefully a bit more touring over autumn. And then, yeah, next year we're making a parent and baby show called A Tale of Us, and then the Detective Dog. So, yeah.
Lots in the works.
Yeah, there are lots in the works. And a baby at some point.
And a baby as well. Well, good luck with all of it. And thank you so much for your time, Tessa.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Make It Work podcast. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our podcast so we can keep bringing you these great chats.